Welcome to the Sad Crime Channel. Today's story took place in Germany. I invite you to listen to the story of a relationship that seemed to be a dream come true until the whole truth came to light. Julia and Sven met in the summer of 2017. Julia lived in Hanover. She loved dogs and had 2 huskies with which she regularly walked in the forest. She belonged to a Facebook group that united owners of this breed of dog, and people in this group arranged outings and hikes together. Julia arranged to meet with a group of friends for an outing scheduled for the weekend, and that's how she met a man who also belonged to the group. This man's name was Sven. They had mutual Facebook friends, and during this walk, they talked for a long time, mainly about dogs and life. After this event, the couple started to meet regularly, getting to know each other, and they talked a lot and found common ground. It turned out that Sven Hildebrandt was a millionaire, but he wasn't your typical millionaire. He didn't flaunt his wealth excessively, didn't boast about it, or show off luxurious things. His parents ran a business and Sven helped them. Julia was 25 years old at this point, while Sven was much older than her. He was 40 years old. And despite this age difference, they got along great, and their acquaintance quickly turned into something more, into a romantic relationship. Sven was very caring, attentive, complimented Julia, and eventually even promised a future together. He dressed rather casually, drove a normal average car. It wasn't an expensive luxury car. He didn't do or buy anything for show. He also didn't attach too much importance to material things. He didn't want to spend his money on nonsense. Rather, he would like to invest it in something. After a short time, the couple decided to make a decision about living together. In the fall of 2017, Julia and Sven went to visit Julia's father. This was an opportunity for him to finally meet his daughter's partner, because he hadn't seen him once before. After her parents' divorce, Julia was raised by her father and was very close to him. During this visit, the couple informed Holger that they were engaged and wanted to spend the rest of their lives together. Julia's father wasn't entirely convinced, neither of this decision nor of his daughter's choice. According to him, 3 months of acquaintance is too short a time to get to know someone well, to see if they really get along, and if they are happy together, if they enjoy living together. When he was alone with his daughter, he explained to her that there was absolutely no malice on his part. He simply worried about her, cared for her, and he also presented arguments why he didn't really like all this. He also claimed that during this short visit, Sven talked too much about money, as if he wanted to show off. And according to Julia's father, you couldn't really see all that money on him. However, Julia brushed it off, saying that she and Sven were destined for each other and that absolutely nothing and no one would change this decision. She had already made a definitive decision to marry this man. After some time, the loving couple went on a trip to Lapland. Sven organized the whole trip, so Julia was delighted. Julia loved snow, nature, dogs, hiking, and walking in the forest. Moreover, she took her dogs with her on this trip and said she would like to live permanently in this place, that she would like to build a house there and spend the rest of her life there. Upon returning to Germany, the couple decided that maybe this was indeed a good idea, and they decided to move to Sweden and buy a house there. They weren't joking or throwing words to the wind because in early 2018 they traveled to Sweden again. They found the perfect place for themselves, then even signed the appropriate documents related to buying this house and already planned at that moment the fastest possible move. In 2017, when Julia started looking for the perfect wedding dress for herself, she participated in a television show about weddings. In 2018, when the couple planned to move to Sweden, someone from the program Goodbye Germany contacted Sven and proposed their participation in the program. Initially, Julia wasn't convinced about it and even refused, but Sven convinced her to participate, persuading her, and eventually she agreed. Therefore, when they went to see the dream house and finalize all the formalities related to the purchase, they also planned to record a few clips needed for this TV program. They told their story, showed the house and the surroundings, held hands, and were very happy. They said how much they loved each other and that they had finally found their other half and could fulfill their dreams together. Sven even confessed that he would like to have children with Julia, and it was a serious step for him because he had been in many relationships before and had never matured to this decision. Julia was moved because Sven told her that he had been waiting for the right person all that time, with whom he could start a family. However, Julia's father didn't share this happiness. He continued to worry about her, especially now when they were about to leave. Move out with a stranger, to a completely different country. Julia's parents were divorced, and Holger shared his concern and thoughts with Julia's mother, informing her about all this. However, she told him not to interfere and not to spoil her daughter's happiness, explaining to him that he was probably overreacting, that Sven was a decent guy and that he should let his daughter live her own life and make her own decisions after all. He wouldn't live her life for her, and if she wants to move abroad, well, why not? It's only her decision. While still in Germany, the couple thought about furnishing their new home, even ordered the first furniture. They increasingly thought about organization, decoration, various details, and in April 2018, they finally moved to Sweden. The move was accompanied by a television crew, which recorded the entire process. Julia was very excited about the move and very excited about the further life in the new place, starting a new life in a new place. Gradually, the furniture ordered in Germany and various other household items were transported to the new home. However, at this point, the first problem arises, the first little friction between the fiancés, because Julia receives a letter from Germany, which came to her mother. She was supposed to pass on all the correspondence, and in this letter, there is specifically a demand for payment for furniture. The problem is that the company supposedly sent this furniture a long time ago, and it hasn't been paid for. Julia is confused because her fiancé, Sven, claimed that he had paid for everything and that it had all gone from his card, but the letter contains her details, her name and surname, and she received this demand for payment. Sven, however, believes that there is nothing to worry about, and that there is nothing to be concerned about, as he thinks there has been some big mistake and promises Julia that he will explain everything. After some time, Julia finally realizes that she may have overreacted and that it doesn't make sense to argue about such nonsense, that it's not worth it. She trusts her fiancé and he will take care of the matter and simply clarify the whole situation. However, this is not the end of problems with furnishing their new home. It turns out that the kitchen equipment did not arrive. Initially, Julia's father, Holger, was supposed to oversee the company from Germany, which was supposed to take care of it, to complete the order on time. Later, however, Sven contacted him and explained that the kitchen did not arrive, but that he would take care of it, so Holger shouldn't worry about it. He shouldn't get involved, because Sven would handle everything. However, Holger contacts the company that was supposed to deliver the furniture, and it turns out that the order has not been paid for. A red flag appears, but he refrains from making any comments. He doesn't want to upset anyone, and doesn't want to spoil his daughter's joy of moving, so he decides to keep this information to himself, especially since apparently Sven dealt with the kitchen issue and had everything sorted out already. After some time, however, Julia's mother sends her more notifications, more demands for payment, for most of the equipment they ordered for the house, and she becomes increasingly angry, increasingly worried. Something is not right, because everything was ordered in her name. And why would Sven order anything in another name when he had so much money? He was a millionaire himself and promised her that he would furnish this house, that he would pay for everything, so that Julia wouldn't have to worry about anything. Julia shows him all these letters, all these demands for payment. She asks why he didn't pay for the orders and why he shops using her name and surname when it was supposed to be all on his account. Sven gets angry and once again claims that it's a mistake, that he has already taken care of everything and everything has been paid for. He also cannot understand why Julia accuses him of anything like that at all, because he claims he wouldn't have ordered anything in her name without asking. The couple starts to argue. Sven claims that it's all a mistake and misunderstanding. Julia, however, is confused and doesn't know what to think about it anymore, whether to believe her fiancé or not. She also has to make numerous phone calls and undo all these purchases and also deal with these demands for payment. At this point, Julia perhaps begins to doubt a little bit about her fiancé's wealth. He loses credibility, and at one point she comes up with the idea of asking him for access to his account. She wants to see if he really has as much money in that account as he claims to have. whether there is anything on that account at all, because she pays for everything. However, nothing comes of it because Sven categorically refuses, gets nervous again, and once again the topic ends in a big argument. In addition to the increasingly frequent arguments, Julia notices that Sven is changing, and he is changing beyond recognition, because he starts to be rude towards her, and sometimes even aggressive. Sometimes Julia is afraid of him. Julia's father is becoming more and more annoyed because Julia stops answering his calls. He feels that something is really wrong and that he should react in some way. So finally, he decides to Google Sven and search for some information about him. He absolutely doesn't believe in the story that Sven presents about himself and doesn't trust him at all. After digging through the entire internet, the man is shocked. It turns out that the guy with whom his daughter plans a future together is just a common scammer. He even finds out that Sven was in prison. According to the information, when he was awaiting trial, he fled to Africa with his then partner. However, he was caught there and brought back to Germany to serve his sentence. Holger also learns that Sven lied even about his age because it turns out he is older. Julia's father decides to confront Sven, so he calls his daughter. And when she picks up, he asks her to turn on the speaker mode and openly asks her partner why he was in prison. Sven is, of course, very upset and initially leaves, but then comes back and explains that he was indeed in prison, but he was actually innocent. He was falsely accused, and Julia knows about it, so he doesn't understand why this call is necessary. Interestingly, Julia confirms this version of events and hangs up, telling her father not to call again. It must be admitted that Julia's father is really stubborn and decides to go to Sven's parents' house to maybe find out more about him. So he sets off on a journey because they live several hundred kilometers away from him. When he arrives, no one opens the door at Sven's parents' house. No one reacts. So after knocking several times, he asks a few neighbors if they know what's going on with Sven's parents. They explain that his father is in a nursing home because he is already old and sick, and they haven't seen his mother for a very long time. And they don't really know what happened to her, whether she is fine or not. There was also information from one of the neighbors that Sven's mother was supposed to live with him somewhere in Sweden. Holger also learns that this man has been married several times, has children, and is unemployed. While still on the spot, an idea comes to his mind to report Sven's missing mother to the police. It seems quite suspicious to him. He also decides that he must go to his daughter and take matters into his own hands. Still on the way, he calls Julia and orders her to immediately leave the house and preferably go to someone's place where she can wait until he arrives. He says it very seriously, and the tone of his voice makes Julia not question it at all. She just does what her father asks her to do. When Holger finally arrives in Sweden, he tells his daughter about what he learned in the last few days. At first, Julia doesn't want to believe it at all. Her father had prepared for such a situation and recorded a conversation with the neighbors of Sven's parents, revealing all the information about him to Julia, that he had been in prison, that his mother had disappeared, and no one had had contact with her for a long time. The gravity of the situation finally dawns on the woman, and she realizes that she must return to Germany as soon as possible, leaving behind the new life that has not yet begun and temporarily abandoning her plans to settle in Sweden permanently. Julia wants to take her belongings from the house, so she goes there with her father, who refuses to leave her alone with Sven even for a moment. He is worried that something else might happen to her, so he informs the Swedish police about everything. However, there are no items belonging to Julia in the house. She is unpleasantly surprised. Stepping out into the backyard, she smells burning. She finds the remnants of a chair that once belonged to her grandfather. The man who promised her a future together has burned all the important items to her in a bonfire. Sven is not at home. Both her father and Julia have no intention of contacting him and return to Germany together. And just when it seemed that everything would fall into place from now on, that Julia was in a toxic relationship and her partner turned out to be a fraudster, but everything would soon be back to normal, Julia receives another message. German police contact her. They inform her that the body of Sven's mother has been found. The woman was cemented in a flower bed right in front of her house. The autopsy revealed that Sven's mother died from extensive head injuries inflicted by strong blows from some tool. Moreover, it was determined that the woman's body was cemented about 2 weeks after her death. Investigators suspect Sven of murder. During the investigation, it is determined that the murder weapon was a poker, and for 2 weeks before the body was cemented, Sven's mother's remains lay in the house wrapped in a carpet. It turns out that not only did Julia live with a fraudster, but she also lived with a murderer. Sven is finally arrested in Sweden, caught during a routine traffic stop. Consequently, he is quickly transported back to Germany, where charges are brought against him. Sven does not plead guilty, claiming that he is innocent and has absolutely nothing to do with his mother's death. During the trial, the prosecution argues that there was a serious argument between Sven and his mother, during which he beat her to death. It may have been about money because they constantly argued about finances. Sven did not work and abused his mother's kindness, who supported him financially, giving him money when he needed it. Sven was heavily in debt. Perhaps then he came to his mother and asked for money. She refused, and an argument ensued which ended fatally for the older woman. Of course, Sven denies this version of events. In 2019, a verdict is reached. Sven is sentenced to 13 years in prison for the murder of his mother. It is not proven that Sven planned to kill his mother. He probably acted in the heat of the moment. Julia, in one of the interviews, admitted that she was really shocked when she learned about the death of Sven's mother and who was responsible for it. At first, she didn't want to believe that he could be responsible for her death. Everything hit her so harshly when he was convicted. Apparently, during the trial, experts were called and diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder. Other women who had previously been involved with Sven also testified, confirming that he had deceived them in many ways. Julia still wonders why Sven wanted to participate in the Goodbye Germany TV program, because he risked the truth about him eventually coming out. Fortunately, however, Julia's father exposed him, and the episode in which they were supposed to appear was ultimately not aired on TV. Julia talks about how their relationship looked at the beginning. She often experienced rejection and longed to finally meet the one, to find love. So when Sven appeared, who pursued her, who cared for her, who was completely the opposite of all the men she had met so far, she truly fell in love. She wanted to believe that everything would work out between them and that she had finally found happiness. She didn't suspect him of anything, nor did she thoroughly check his past. She simply believed him without question, and Sven exploited that trust. He also tried to isolate Julia from her friends, acquaintances, and family. He often slandered them, spoke bad about them, and even encouraged Julia not to talk to her father. Only after the truth about him came out, Julia realized the danger she was in, and that she could have been his victim too, and that it could have ended very badly. She also wonders to what extent Sven could have gone against her, since he was capable of murdering his own mother. She also said that Sven ruined her financially and mentally. After he went to prison, he still tried to contact Julia, sending her letters, but she wants nothing to do with him and does not intend to respond. Julia, after everything, signed up for therapy and wanted to work through her issues and trauma with a specialist. She explains that during the trial, she was mentally exhausted, and those were 2 really tough months in her life. She couldn't come to terms with the fact that she trusted Sven, that she allowed him to manipulate her and control her entire life. When asked what advice she would give to other women who have experienced something similar, who have found themselves in a situation like hers, she responds that it's best to seek help from a specialist, work through your problems, and also not rush into a new relationship with such emotional baggage. Julia also started a closed group on Facebook to provide a place and platform for women to share their stories. And that's the end for today. Thank you for listening until the end. Until next time, goodbye.